often do you check the best by date to see if your milk is still drinkable? And how often are you like, well, today I'm with a friend of mine, Edith, who I've known for years and I really admire. And I think the work she does is super important. And it never really occurred to me until the other day how similar it was to language and accent. And you'd probably never believe me if I said my guest today works with risk assessment in food safety. But stick with me because I promise you that we're going to draw parallels and talk about culture, errors versus mistakes, and how it can make the world a better place, one checklist at a time. Now, let's get on with the show. I'm Bianca, your personal American accent coach, and I'm here to help you master an American accent in English because your voice is your choice when it comes to how you sound. I try to release a podcast episode every 2 weeks, and so you should really subscribe to whatever podcast platform you use so that you don't miss the newest episode. And by the way, if you want to see the full video of the episode, it's available at Accent Coach Bianca on YouTube. Now, let's get on with the show. So my friend and I'll definitely say friend, I will say, I don't know if we're colleagues yet, but in some way we kind of are because
we're getting into
decided
that realm, the both of us.
Exactly. And because we're both professionals, we're both women, we're friends. And then we finally decided like, hey, wait, there's some interesting overlap here between what we both do. And it was funny how we did this because we went to Costco the other day. You're like, I need some stuff. I'm like, let's go. And I remembered I had these raspberries.
Best
And
hangout
I
ever,
was
by the way. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to say best hangout ever. Please
exactly.
continue.
And so I was like, oh my God, I have these like disgusting raspberries and I want to complain. I want to complain to Costco. So let me grab them. And it's a funny thing because people often ask me, I don't know if you've ever heard this from me, but people will say like, oh, how do you like Mexico? Do you think you're going to stay? And they're like, oh, what made you fall in love with Mexico? And I swear to you, true story, the fact that I can get raspberries in like February and they're fresh, I'm like, this is the place for me because raspberries are my favorite fruit. And so I'm so disappointed. It is the second time that I bought raspberries from Costco and they went bad in like 2 days. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm bringing these back, right? I feel like it is my duty to be like, Costco, that's not cool. Like your raspberries are coming from an hour away. They're not on a plane from some other country. Like they're coming from down the street. There's no reason these should be going bad in 2 days. So to make a short story long, you and I went to Costco. I was complaining about raspberries standing next to you. And I thought, this is my friend who knows all about like food and food safety and spoilage and things like that. And I thought, oh my God, we've got to talk about this because we ended up talking later about culture. I remember we went to get like the Costco hot dog, right? And we were talking about how you have to create a culture around all of this stuff. So that's the quick background about what the hell does language and accent have to do with food safety? Like that's how we discovered that, you know what, a lot more than you think. So first and foremost, I've been talking a lot, but Edith, I want you to introduce yourself for people who probably don't know you because it's the first podcast episode we've done together.
Hi, thank you for having me, first of all. I'm actually very honored that I get to have a little space to test my English, my areas of improvement. There you go, right?
Nice.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Yay!
So
I'm super excited.
Thank you. I am Edith in English and Edith in Español. So I usually introduce myself as Laura because it's easier. It's also my first name, which is something interesting because I usually don't use my first name.
Oh my God,
that's like an uncommon thing. Yes, please, go ahead.
At your wedding, I remember I went to your wedding and I was kind of confused for a second. Who's Laura? Laura's getting married? Who's Laura? And I've only once ever called you that, and it was because of that. It was at your wedding, and it was on the invitation. So, just correct. Now I was like, who's that? Oh, yeah, that's you. Sorry. So yeah, I know you by Edith. I've known you for years. Sorry, please continue, though. So, like, tell us a little bit about what you do more.
Speaking of, like, interesting Mexican or cultural interesting like facts, right? Like we use our second name rather than our first usually. And
true.
People can go by like years and just don't know about that. It's not the first time that I like somebody's shocked, like, what? How how come I didn't know your first name? Like I've known you for years. Yeah. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. And I think that's something I learned recently too is this thing about names and how we're gonna go off on a tangent right now, but like in the US, maybe it's generational too, but I know when I was a kid, nobody could say my name correctly. My teachers would call me Bianca, everyone Bianca, Banaka, like there was no end of mistakes of pronunciation in my name because it wasn't common. But I feel like more in Mexico, at least in my experience, I've noticed that a lot of the names are family names, right? So if Carlos is a family name, then a lot of people are named Carlos in the family.
Correct.
And that's why they'll often use the second name, or that's why you've got these nicknames. There's so many nicknames,
Hmm.
that people can be called. And I realized that literally just the other day. So I think so it is interesting that for you it's your second name. And for me, I was always such a stickler about no, my name is not Blanca, it's Bianca. Like
Right.
that's something that I've had to like, yeah, grow up and deal with too. So
Yes.
side note about names, and now if you don't mind, tell us
Yeah.
do a better job than I did about telling us about what you do.
Right. So I am a food safety consultant for the most part. Lately, I've been diving into near or similar areas in that realm, I'm going to say. But mostly, I do risk management. I try to implement that way of thinking, especially in a culture that is not really used to driving most decisions or daily decisions in risk management. So we can talk
Mhm.
about that
Yeah,
further on,
that's the
but
whole
that's,
point. Yeah,
yes,
that's the whole point. Exactly, exactly. So food safety and risk management, and you're thinking, well, what does that have to do with language and English and things like that? But
yes,
but you kind of just said it not long ago, areas for improvement, right? There's also like cultures and thoughts and beliefs that we grew up often in the education system
correct.
because like yeah you're in a classroom right and you don't want to be wrong and the teacher's going to say something or you're going to have that red pen come out and so there's whether we like it or not, cultures are created and they're things that we live with. And a lot of these things, like you said, risk management is like me when I'm speaking in a language, often I hold back or I don't want to make errors. I don't want to make mistakes because that's really bad. And for some people, kind of traumatic, from school. So there's quite a lot
Mhm.
of overlap. And let's start with that like language and farm food safety, right? Tell me what you were thinking about because I know that we had this really in-depth conversation at Costco and I'm like, "Oh my God, we should be writing this down." No, 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 we should be recording it. But yeah, tell me what you remember or what you feel like is the intersection between those two things.
I think it all begins with the type of decisions that we make daily, right? I'm
Tell me
gonna
more about
start with
that.
that, right?
Okay, let's hear.
Like I'm gonna start with that as a professional. I think technical learning was driven most of my decisions, but I kind of let aside the human side or the human aspect, which then began to become not a trend, but I realized most things were like the things that were not working in the system were the human aspects because we all make mistakes, we get late to work and then we begin stuff late and then we, like things happen. Like the human error simply exists. We're not going to
Hmm.
erase it from the equation. So we mix that technical learning with teaching people how to even identify mistakes so they can correct them instantly, right?
Hmm.
And that like binds perfectly as a tendency, as I said, with the
Hmm.
cultural aspect of things. How
Hmm.
even open are we to maybe have feedback, right? For example, yeah. So I think that even opens like another door that is like very near, as we were saying, as colleagues, with
Yeah.
even accent, learning new languages, So that's even like I'm gonna give you back the microphone, right? You totally know about all of this.
Because you can see me because since we're recording the video too, you can see me like I'm like, oh my God, I have so much more to say. And so when you just said mistakes, when you're like, oh, we're all human, like I came to work late or I'm having a hard day, blah blah blah, whatever it is, there's maybe a little thing we can slip in here about the idea, and tell me if this pertains to farm food safety, the
Hmm.
idea of a mistake and an error, and the way that I teach them at least is a mistake is, yeah, I just haven't had my coffee yet. Or what I'm just really tired today, or what's going on? I've got my period and I have brain fog or whatever.
Hmm.
Like that's a mistake. It's like I know the right thing to do. I just that just didn't do it, but I recognize and I can fix it myself. Whereas an error is something that I've never been pointed out. I've never been
Mm.
trained. I didn't even know that that was the wrong thing to do, right? Like, so at least when we're talking language, we're talking mistakes are something you can self-correct. But an error is something I can't expect you to catch because nobody's ever told you before, right? Or not enough for that you learn to recognize it. Would you say that there's the same parallel then between
Yeah.
that and like farm food safety? Okay. Uh-huh.
I think
Uh-huh.
this opens perfectly like an aha moment for me. Or can
Mm-hmm.
you explain
Totally.
how to like pronounce that, please?
Yeah, aha. Yeah, an aha. Oh my God. Aha.
Yes,
Aha
thank you.
moment. Yeah.
Okay,
This is
maybe I
an
just needed
aha
a
moment.
little enthusiasm from me. The aha
Totally,
moment.
totally. Elaborate if you don't mind. Then what does that make you think of?
Because I think like the biggest difference between both type of like similar actions as a mistake and as an error depends on how self-aware you are from the issue, correct? It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like it's easier when you already identified that's an issue and you can fix it, or you can implement that as something that, it's a routine kind of thing to have everything ready for your coffee every morning, or grinding the coffee one day
Yeah, yeah,
before
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of thing. That's like
Uh-huh.
yes, a behavior, but also like an attitude, rather than not even being aware of what's going on with me. Like maybe I haven't had breakfast.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean,
Uh,
some calories, for example.
there's a reason I slipped up today, right? Like
Mhm.
there's the slip, which we can recognize, but then if we recognize the reason behind it, right, then that's even maybe more powerful too. How would you translate this to like the farm thing? Like what are some behaviors that you might notice or some self-awareness things that come to light that happen like on a farm, let's say, where like food is being created for people or grown for people to consume?
That's a great question. Because I think that's the entire definition of food safety in this case,
Mm.
in the sense that if people that work in the agricultural industry are aware, or aware, we should be more aware, but are aware of the damage that that food can make to people that consume it, if they were that self-aware of their implication in the matter, let's say, would
Mm-hmm.
have a way different kind of mindset, rather than saying, I don't know who this is for, whatever. I'm just going to spit right next to this. Like I'm not going to wash my
Uh-huh.
hands, whatever. I already did this morning, like I'm going like over the top
Mm-hmm.
with the examples,
Right,
of
right.
course.
The
But what
examples
I'm
you
trying to say is
uh-huh.
like there's like a cultural tendency to like maybe sometimes not care when it's something that is not yours,
Mhm, mhm.
or it's not for you.
Yeah. Or it's just my job or somebody else will take care of it
Yes.
later or any
Not
number any
having
number of
ownership.
things.
Yes, not
Yeah,
having
yeah, yeah, yeah.
ownership in their like own activities or their own decisions, right?
And there's a distance too, I guess, from the farm to the table, let's say, from the person who's, I don't know, washing the lettuce or picking the things, and I don't even know all the processes, but there's a lot of things that go on when something
Yes.
is getting packaged or something like that. So you're looking at all the steps and saying like, how can we reduce the risk of people getting sick at the actual farm? Do you have any, I don't want to put you on the spot,
Correct.
but do you have any numbers of like how many people this actually does impact? Because I think sometimes when we see the news and there's an E. coli outbreak or something like
Yes.
that, like we have this flash in the pan and we forget that like the actually food safety is an ongoing thing because like it probably happens way more than we realize, and that makes the news. So if you have any statistics for us, like please let us know.
Sure. Yes. Later on, I can speak more and tell you where else you can find more information. But yeah, it's over 600,000 reports, let's say, in the past 5 to 7 years, roughly.
Wow, wow. And these could be people getting sick. This is reported too, by the way, so the numbers are probably higher.
Yes.
This so people
Sorry,
getting sick.
correction. 600 million. My
600
bad.
million. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
I
Sorry.
was
My
thinking
bad. I was like, that's not that high. No, no, no. That's really high. Yes. Sorry. My
I
bad.
was thinking I was thinking the same thing. I was like, okay, that's high, but not as bad.
It's
And then
hard
I
to
was gonna
quantify because it's
think
that big,
about
the
the
number.
cases. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So a lot more than we originally thought. But this is a range too. Like people can just be like maybe they have a case of diarrhea versus like we're talking deaths as well. Like right because why?
Correct.
Because lack of food safety, right? And so the point we're trying to make is there's errors which people are not aware of, right? And there's mistakes, right? And that's something that people know, but they don't do for whatever reason. So getting back to the idea of culture, right? And you were saying like how, oh, there's a culture of it's just a work culture, right? Like any work culture, right? Things, habits develop, and that's just what we do. And I'm thinking of it's actually a business book. I don't know if you know this guy who does a lot of business books. His name is Seth Godin. And one of his famous quotes that I
Rings
really
bell.
like, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one of his famous quotes is, I don't know if you know it, it's people like us do things like this. And he's talking about like building culture, and on
Mm,
purpose. And when we were talking just a minute ago about accent too, I think maybe this relates as well. Do you think that there's culture in the workplace, there's culture in whatever, in my Accent Academy group, there's cultures everywhere, you have groups of people, there's culture, and don't you think there's a relationship between the culture and then the personal identity as well? So if we say people like us do things like this,
yeah.
can we then also make a difference, or can we talk about how culture and
Yes.
individual,
And I think that goes
identity
directly, yes,
changes?
to like what I've gained as experience working, in the sense that when culture, again, having a lack of ownership with
Mm-hmm.
your team or within your company, when you have a weak culture, the response tends to move the problem somewhere else, but not fix it.
Mm-hmm, 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 exactly. And I think the reason that we started even talking about all of this was because we were talking about rules, like you and I. We were talking about, like, I think it was the dates on the package of raspberries or something. And I was like, yeah, but this shouldn't be like this. Like, this is how these are my expectations. These are the rules, right? And then we started talking about how, like, yeah, there's tons of rules, but who cares? Because culture is the driver, right? It doesn't matter if there's rules written down. The culture is like, hey, are we a group of people who follows the rules we make? Are we a group of people who just makes the rules and puts them on the door and for, in time for an inspection or something like that? Or is this just how we do things? So to bring all that around, that's when you were telling me about this thing, which I said, oh, I really like this quote. And then you told me something that I didn't know about, which was this thing about the 5 pillars of workplace culture. So I would be really excited if you could tell all of our listeners what those are.
So, speaking of culture, I think a way to understand better where this comes from or where it gains its strength, I'm going to say. So, those pillars, like what gives it the power that it needs, the momentum, even or inertia to, keep going and not stop.
Yeah. And I like the idea of pillars too. Like when you visualize pillars, you see them like holding something up. You know what I mean? So yeah, I
Hmm.
like the idea of momentum, and I also like the thing that like this is the foundation maybe, of
Yes.
of
Yes.
of all cultures, I guess. Any kind of culture you want to talk about. Yeah. Yeah. So tell us what those would be.
Okay. So, it's reward,
Mhm.
it's empowerment, teamwork, communication, and training.
I'm gonna let you choose. Is there any one that you think kind of is more important than the others, or any that you identify with more, that you like more?
I think there are two
Hmm.
that go very hand in hand,
Okay.
which is empowerment and teamwork.
Well, not the two I was expecting you to say. So tell me more about,
Interesting.
yeah. I see how they go together,
Yeah,
but I wasn't gonna expect you to pick that. I thought you were gonna say training actually and communication. So I'm
true.
surprised. Tell me why you chose these two, and yeah, in your experience.
I think um I like the fact that we're like diving into this in this format where we begin with teamwork, because I
Mm.
think this is actually where we find our teamwork during
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
training, right? We empower each other.
Mm-hmm.
So this is
Mm-hmm.
like training is actually the place and the moment, but the activity itself or like the inertia
Uh-huh.
or momentum that I'm saying comes
Yeah,
from
yeah.
the teamwork and the empowerment that happens
Uh-huh.
within
It's the
like,
way, we could
yeah,
say,
yes,
the
that
method
happen.
in which
Yes,
it comes
correct.
out then.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
nice.
Because
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
if we could think of like a product that comes with teamwork, I think it's that sense of pride that it comes when we do the right thing, right?
Oh, yes, exactly. Or we've a good job. We've done a good job, and I
Mm,
couldn't do it without you. And
yeah.
it's often like, yeah, exactly, exactly. Because within a culture, anyways, right? You've got your lone wolves, right?
Mm,
Which probably aren't in the team. But if you're going to have a team, then your team needs to stick together, right? So like the values of I value teamwork. I value us patting each other on the back. I value all these things. That's just reinforcing the culture. You
correct.
know what I mean? Yes, yes. It's
Yep.
kind of cyclical in
Yeah.
a way. Yeah,
Yeah. And I
absolutely.
think it's easier to explain it as if it was like a material thing, having it like be near to a teamwork, right? Like we can be a team
Hmm.
and we can have like our name and the name tags and everything, but
Yeah,
like, you know,
doing.
physically what
Yeah.
this is what it means to have a good culture, right?
Uh
There's the
huh. Uh
possibility
huh.
to have good teamwork.
Yes, yes. And then so to go back, how are they related? That teamwork and the empowerment too. Like, how do we do that? The how, in what way does that come about? To me, a lot of times that's in training. No, I don't know if you've had this
Correct.
experience, but like when you work at a job, let's say, and you have maybe your orientation, that's where you meet all the people that started at the same time as you, right? There's trainings, there's meetings and things like that. And all of these are kind of like opportunities to do the how. How do we become a team, right? Oh, maybe we have like inside jokes from when we had this training, and so there's so much of the culture kind of arises in that thing, if that makes
Yeah.
sense how I'm describing it.
Yeah. I think it takes root there, actually.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Hmm.
So we talked about a couple of things, kind of. Tell me more about either of those if you want to add anything. But also, I wanted to talk more about training because I feel like that's where, like, if we go back to food safety and language, right? Training,
Hmm.
training, training. This is where we can build the culture. As we said, that's how. How do we build culture? Through training,
Yes.
maybe explicitly, maybe implicitly. Maybe the training says, "Here's your training manual. We are training right now." And but maybe that's not. Maybe the training is the doing. For example, for me, when I'm doing language and accent stuff, right? We come together as a group, and the doing is the training. Maybe this rings true for you, but we mentioned too, I don't think we've talked about it today, but when we were together before, we talked about having a safe space
Hmm.
and having a safe space to make mistakes, to talk about mistakes, right? To make things better. And to me, that's where the training comes from, if that
Yes.
kind of makes sense, right? So yeah, I know at least in language stuff, like we're saying, okay, on Tuesdays, we come together as a group, everyone takes a turn. Your job is to make mistakes, and our job is to help you. And then it's going to be my turn, and I'm going to make mistakes, and you're going to help me, and I'm going to take my turn with
Yeah.
that too. So that's kind of the culture that we have in my group. Tell me more about farm food safety. How do you do the training? How do you train people? How do you build the culture through training? Do you mind pausing for a second and talking more about training? Because I think that's interesting.
Yes. I think that reminds me of communication. That is like another pillar that goes very close or hand in hand with training, right? Because
Hmm.
I think we've been touching on communication for a bit, in moments during the conversation, because it's just related to training. It's the moment where we can have that safe space that you were mentioning, right? Where can we have a space where we can share our concerns and actually do something that moves through the organization without the fear of like being singled out, for example, like, oh, were you the one that made the mistake? Like
Uh,
rang the alarm accidentally, and now we're all here at the parking lot because somebody thought there was an actual accident. I don't know, something.
uh-huh.
I'm just,
Uh-huh.
trying to come up with like ideas that can make someone fearful of speaking up, right? So
Yeah. Yeah,
that
yeah.
part
For
of
example,
communication connects the training to say, oh no, you have to be aware that not saying or not doing the right thing is actually the wrong decision.
it's worse. Exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
just I swear to you,
Yes.
this morning, as we're recording this morning, there's a guy who comes to my masterclass every month.
Hmm.
And he never turns on his camera, which usually we're like camera on guys because we want to get to know each other. But for whatever reason, he never turns his camera on, right? So I know his name, I know who he is. I don't know what he looks like, but he sent me a message this morning. He's like, "Hey, I never got the replay from last month. It never showed up in my email." And I said, "Well, did you check your spam? Because like what always happens, right? It's in the spam." And he's like, "Yeah, I checked my spam. It's not there." And I thought, huh. well, first of all, thanks for ringing the alarm bell, let's say,
You're
right?
welcome.
Like, and I thought, ah, it's in a spam, right? It happens all the time. No, it never went out. And I was like, oh my God, thank you so much for highlighting this problem. So it's not just him, it's however many hundreds of people who could not attend the masterclass but wanted the replay, right? So, like you were saying, when you do like, and maybe it's a fire alarm, maybe it is a mistake raising that flag, but knowing that, like, you know, having the courage to put your hand up and say, I think there's a mistake here. I think this isn't in line with what we do. I think that like there's something that we could do better here. Maybe this is going to cause another problem. Like having the courage to do that, I think is the thing we're trying to value more, if that's what you're saying, right?
Yes, yes. And I think we can only get that through training.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, and empowerment, right? If we come
Yeah.
back to that
Hmm.
idea, like
See,
how
like
and
that's the
how many
perfect moment to actually empower them, right?
exactly, and praise too, I would say, because how many times, maybe it's just the way a lot of business cultures work, but it's very top down, right? Like there's this pyramid that often if you're at the bottom, you're made to feel like you don't have a voice. You aren't empowered to say, "Hey, this is wrong," right? Or, "Hey, there's a mistake here." Because why? Because it's already been through other people and that might make them look bad or something like that. So I think a lot of us have been indoctrinated in other cultures that are like, no, 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 don't speak up, don't speak up. You're gonna stick out. You're gonna maybe make somebody else look bad, who could then make you look bad. Like these are
Like you can
learned
get in trouble.
behaviors. Exactly. I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm gonna get someone else in trouble, right? So these are like learned behaviors where, yeah, we learn it's safer not to say anything generally, right? Because what am I gonna get out of it? I'm probably just gonna, take some flack for stirring up the pot, or something like that. So we want to encourage a culture, I think both of us, where like if you see something, you should say something, right?
Yeah, that's simple.
So maybe coming back to training, we're training people to say something when they see something in food safety. We're training people in my group when they hear a mistake, like they write it down, right? If you say comfortable instead of
Mm,
comfortable, right? I shouldn't be the only one that hears that as a mistake. I'm trying to train everybody else to hear and participate too, because I think in the end of the day, we're both trying to create a culture where like more is more, you know what I mean?
right.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you're able to share any true stories or anything about food safety, but do you have any stories about like maybe somebody noticing and shifting their point of view and being like, oh yeah, like I used to, I don't know, uh, spit in the sink and now I don't, or or like without obviously giving names and things like that. But are there any stories that you might have to where you saw the culture change because people were empowered or they got some training that they just didn't know, beforehand? Can you maybe talk about that?
Yes, I can think of many examples of wonderful farmers where they are actually like really interested, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh wait, I want to maybe frame this a little bit better too because I think it goes without saying between us, but maybe we should say it explicitly is that we want to make sure that like we're not saying that people are causing problems because of any other thing other than the word ignorance. And ignorance usually gets kind of a bad rap, but ignorance just means somebody doesn't know. Doesn't mean they're not interested. It doesn't mean they want to willfully cause harm or anything like that. And like you were just saying, I think the words you used were like these wonderful farmers. Exactly. Like these are wonderful people who don't want to make people sick, right? They
Of
just
course,
don't maybe know. So yeah, sorry to interrupt your story. Please like go on.
I think it's like a perfect frame from for what I was saying. So thank you. Yeah, sometimes it's just the ignorance that comes with not having sometimes the information in the right language, first of all.
Also,
Yeah.
good point. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
It might not be
Yes.
available in Spanish. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Yes.
So
So, I
that
mean,
could be
times
another hurdle.
have like passed and now we have more information in Spanish, but it's
Mhm.
not the same amount of quality information that we can access so we can present to them. Because sometimes that is like costly or they may need a consultant, like that adds on to the price tag. But
Mhm. Oh, that
most of
makes
them,
sense.
when they get like the gist of the whole thing and they understand like, oh, like having actually good manufacturing practice is a good thing for me. and people are
Mm-hmm.
trained, so I don't have to worry about more things like getting them or them getting distracted by the phone and like watching TikToks at work, because actually a food
Uh,
safety rule is that they cannot use their phone while working. They
right,
cannot
right.
be packing tomatoes and like scrolling on the phone. That
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
if we talk about this, it clearly sounds like a rational thing to do, correct?
Yeah.
But when you're working with 100 people in a huge factory, sometimes those things can get like a regular practice if we don't implement the right policies, right?
And we're explicit about it, right? There was this idea of explicit, like if we say, hey, this is what we're gonna do because this is our culture and we are gonna all agree to this, this is we're a team, and saying like hey, this could cause problems, we're gonna just like take this out. And maybe it's because like you don't think of things at first. Yeah, you think like, oh, these tomatoes are whizzing by at I don't know how many on a belt per hour, and you're like, la 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 la. Of course, there's no problem. Never going to be any problem. But like you were saying, like, hey, this is one thing that we can do that if we all agree to it, then it can make a better place. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Yeah,
solves more
absolutely.
issues with like one.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. You kind of glossed over, but I think this is worth repeating is the idea that like, okay, let's say I'm a small business owner, I'm a small farm, and I say, oof, I don't have these things in Spanish for my workers. It might cost me to get a consultant to have these translated, to run a training, this and that. But then as you said, actually the more you invest in that, you get a better name for that. You get a better reputation for that,
Yes,
right? And so culture often breeds reputation. You become known for your culture.
you become trustworthy.
Exactly. Consistency, right? You have trustworthiness.
Mhm.
That becomes part of your branding. You know what I mean? And this could be true for a number of different like areas, products and services. Is like, I know we're talking about farm food safety right now, but this could apply to so many other things. Surprisingly could apply to so many things. And we opened this door the other day. It was so random, but we're like, oh wait, we have so much in common, about these things. So I'm going to go over those 5 pillars again,
Yeah.
and let's see what other kind of parallels we can draw. So reward. I'm going to run through them quickly, then we'll go one by one. Reward, empowerment, teamwork, communication, and training, right? Are there any of those other ones? I'm specifically thinking of like reward. Are there any
Mhm.
others where you're like, oh yeah, I can see how this is important for creating a culture?
I was also thinking of reward.
Okay. What were you thinking about for reward?
I think you actually mentioned reward just like a few seconds ago
Oh, okay.
when we were speaking of another pillar, and I was like, oh, that's a great segue. Because
Okay, I forget what it was.
like when you were saying like doing the right thing comes with rewards, so I was like that touches perfectly on what we were saying, like
Hmm.
having uh frequent meetings for training gives us room for reward, like maybe cake for the month. I don't know, I'm just saying things.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Or like the
Yeah,
best employee, like that's gonna give us something like within the teamwork but also outside of the company, right? Like that's just gonna permeate outside or to the
totally.
outside, in my opinion,
Yeah.
or in my experience, which I think counts as something.
That's a point of pride, right? Like even if you have anybody anywhere, when you have like, I don't know, employee of the month or most hands washed, or guys like we even had to buy more soap. Can you believe that? That's fantastic. I'd rather have to buy more soap than, have people getting sick and then we have a
Yes,
recall on lettuce or whatever, and so like all these little things that we can celebrate. It reminds me of like in my group on Tuesdays when we're our whole reason for being is we give feedback that day, and we call it the Accent Feedback
perfect.
Club. Yeah, and like we have in the community, we have you can throw up some emojis, you can do some reactions. We also have a soundboard. And so at any one time, you can give somebody a round of applause. And we have different kinds of like applause, right? So you can give them regular applause, or you can give one that says like certified badass and some other fun stuff. So we're constantly giving rewards. And I tell me if you agree with this. I think a lot of times too, that spontaneous reward, that thing that was
Mm,
unexpected, is the thing that really like causes the most pride, and desire to keep doing the right thing, whatever that happens to be. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
been in your experience, but yeah.
Yeah, that's the most. I agree.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. These little things that people can do where they say like, "Oh, I notice. I notice that this is oh, I
Yeah.
smell bleach. Oh, it must be clean here. Oh, I noticed that. I noticed that you guys are cleaning more frequently, right?" And maybe that's like we said, explicit. Maybe I'm saying it, or maybe it's implicit. Maybe I'm thinking of. I don't know if they still do this, but in a lot of factories, they used to have this sign that said like there was a number, and then it would say days since last accident, right?
Mm.
And they used to do this thing where if they had an accident in the factory floor, they'd reset the number. And then if they had no accidents, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And there was this count, and people used to look at that with like kind of a source of pride as well. I don't know if that goes along with kind of a reward, but I think it is. We do kind of reward ourselves, internally, like high five, guys. Yeah, it's been a week since we made a mistake, and that's just like the things that I'm
You
thinking of when you
know,
mention that.
yes, I think reward is just another way to materialize. Speaking of materializing things, teamwork,
Mm-hmm.
it's another way to materialize that the needle is like moving towards positive numbers, right? Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
in zero, it's not negative, it's actually moving forward. Like well,
Yeah.
not moving forward in a needle way, but like it's actually on the positive, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can be so subtle. I don't know if this is true where you are. It's kind of hard to quantify a lot of things. If we're talking language and accent, like I think we have been doing and we're doing now specifically, when people are with me or with another accent coach, or let's say you're learning language, right? And you're like, you're learning your language and you forget like how much work went into it, and you forget all the little things that you had to do and you had to learn. I was making some slides for tomorrow. I was going to go live, and the word THING was there. And I thought, what am I going to point out about this word? Oh my God, everything. The TH, the short I, the I sound, the NG sound. No, I'm sorry, the word was think. So in the spelling, it's THINK, but that N is actually the NG sound. Thing, right? And I thought there's only one easy thing about this word. It's the K on here. So once you realize somebody has these like five things to deal with just in the word think, and then you're like, wow, you're nailing all of those things except maybe one, like the NG, and that's because it's the spelling, it's not you. It's kind of amazing how, like you said, that needle moves, it's on the positive side, but we forget all of the little things that we're doing right all the
Mhm.
time, is what I'm trying to say. And
Yeah.
like, so to sit back and say, like, wow, all of this is good. Let's improve this little thing too. Let's put that in the win column, as well. That goes to empowerment, I think.
Yeah.
You know what I
And I
mean? Like,
even
yeah.
personally, we tend to forget that.
Right?
Sometimes
Right?
we're in like grind and hard work mode. We tend to
Mm-hmm.
forget something that is a pillar of good culture, right?
Right, right. And practice, right? Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about language and culture, one thing I haven't mentioned is, which is probably a contrast you've noticed too, is when you get a new team member in there, right? Because whenever we welcome somebody new, we pause, we have introductions, and I can tell you that the first day that person is just like observing because it's really overwhelming. And we say to that person, "Hey, we don't expect you to catch any mistakes right away. Like you don't even know what you're listening for. But take a look, see how, observe how is this culture, right? Notice how, at least in my group, people jump in. Notice how they're catching words. Maybe they're not sure, but they're still gonna kind of raise the alarm bell. They're gonna say, I think there's something weird about this, or it reminds me of another thing, and they bring up other things, because we didn't mention this earlier in the story, but the end of the raspberry story, there's two parts. Number one, I take back my raspberries. I'm like, give me my money back. This is not cool. It's not that it was expensive, but I think I have an
It was a
obligation.
principle.
Yeah, it's the principle. It's the principle, number one. Number two, I feel like I have an obligation to tell them, hey, maybe nobody else is raising the red flag about this. And so you think everything's okay when it's clearly not. And maybe that's US culture too, is like, I want to help you, Costco. I like Costco. I want you to know, like, something's going on here because some people are afraid to say something. And what did she say? She was like, next time, put your raspberries in the freezer. And I was like, girl, I do not need to put the bad raspberries I bought from you into my freezer. I should not have to take care of that. And then you and I went into like the refrigerator area, that freezing cold room, and we saw like two or three other things that had mold on them. And I remember how like aghast we were. So now I want to like take that and talk about, yeah, like maybe not even responsibility, but ownership, things like that. Like what are some things that came up for you about that? I know there were like questions that we were thinking about for culture. Take that and run with it if you don't mind.
Yes. So I was also shocked by the answer. First of all, I was not expecting for them to having you or asking you to freeze evidence. That's just
Mm-hmm.
like not how I think should go about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was like something that first touched on culture on our day trip.
Culture of Costco, right?
Yeah.
Culture of letting somebody know that there might be a problem, right? Like, yeah, absolutely. Uh-huh, uh-huh. And what
Yes.
else were you thinking of?
So we were like kind of still having that in the back of our minds because we did that first, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
then
first.
we went to the actual shopping part of the Costco visit. And then when we get to the refrigerator, oh,
Uh-huh,
see,
uh-huh.
that was better.
Refrigerator. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Refrigerator. Yes, that was
Uh-huh.
better. That was better.
There you go.
um, we realized that there were more fruits that were going bad. So maybe instead of asking us to freeze the package, maybe you can go and take a look of the actual conditions of the fruit that you're selling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fruit, it's gonna go bad quickly, no matter what, for the most
Yeah,
part. Like in their
yeah.
natural sense or the scientific aspect of things, that's understandable. However, as you were saying, they generally come from very close,
Yeah,
first of
yeah.
all.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, that's the guarantee, right? Like the Costco guarantee that you can get fresh fruit. So this is like the begin of the entire conversation. Well, something that
Yeah.
we just like also connected to people speak up when something's wrong. Like somebody realized something in the refrigerator area was not okay. Maybe the temperature, maybe as easy as that. Maybe the fruit has been there for too long. Maybe it was not refrigerated correctly in the transit. Yeah, that like brings a lot of not flags, but possible outcomes or reasons.
Yeah. And
So
questions too.
yes.
Yeah. Like you said, who's comfortable speaking up when something is
Hmm.
wrong, right? Like
Yeah.
I felt we were going to go to Costco, right? And I thought, oh, let me tell them about these raspberries. Let's do that first. And I felt confident that it was going to be at least like, oh, thank you so much for telling me. And then we were in the refrigerated section. And I think there was mold on the strawberries and the figs. And did I then feel rewarded and empowered to tell anybody at Costco, hey, there's like a ton of
For
mold
speaking
here?
up. Yeah.
No, I didn't feel like that my honesty or my help would be rewarded, right? Because of what had happened, 20 minutes before that too. And that raises the same questions like on the farm. That raises the same questions in my group, let's say, right? In any
Yeah.
language group, right? Do we feel
Yeah.
comfortable saying like, I think your verb tense is wrong there, or because most of the time students will not feel comfortable speaking up when there's a teacher there. Maybe they'll just, register it in their head or they'll write it down for a question later, look it up later, right? But why not bring it up? Why not like say, hey, there's something going on here, and
So I'm just
yeah,
gonna like plug a little promo here for
please,
those
please.
Tuesdays that I hear for
Thank you.
feedback.
Yeah,
This is
exactly,
like the
exactly.
perfect window, right? To speak of Costco, but like, of course, but like those Tuesdays sound great in that way too. Like every time that when you were saying when you have a new person that tags along, like
Hmm.
that event is like, oh, this is inviting me to learn the new culture, to
Hmm.
actually learn how other people do it the right way.
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Mistakes
And
are
then like
okay.
maybe yes, and maybe like present myself as imperfect as I am because I know that they are inviting me to do so. So this is like the perfect experience to get out of my head and just like get myself a little something of that big culture, right?
Uh-huh,
The
uh-huh.
positive.
Exactly, exactly. And so, like, I mean, I wasn't seeing this anywhere else. So I was like, let's do this. Let's talk about it. Let's say, like, what's the problem? Is it a problem? What's the mistake? Is it an error? How do we fix it? How do we know? Right. So, yeah, it's all about, like we were saying, empowerment, training, right? This is a culture that I'm creating. And you're trying to create, tell me if I'm wrong here, you're trying to create this culture around farms and food safety. And so, like, what are some things that we haven't already talked about, if anything, about how you're trying to do that? What do you see that could be better?
That's a great question. I mean, I would love to see things improve on many levels and on many aspects, but I'm going to say that getting a strong culture takes time.
Mm.
And I think getting to the mature state is what I'd like to see more of. Yeah.
When you say mature, give us maybe more information or an example.
I'm going to say like a team that is aware of the most likely, not mistakes. Well, yeah, actually, it could be mistakes. Yes, as well. The most likely conditions. Yes. Conditions that could be problematic.
Yeah, mistake is almost like something was done but wrong or omitted, right? But it could just be conditions, right? It could be from rain
Correct.
or something like that. Yeah,
Yep.
maybe it's not
Could be
somebody
just
else, but
like a leak because of
uh-huh,
like
a
some
pipe burst, whatever.
yes,
Yeah, that's a good distinction there. Yeah, exactly. So maybe nobody made a mistake, but noticing the conditions. And I think that's what we talked about
correct.
too, was a culture of
Self-awareness.
noticing. Yeah,
If you're
yeah, yeah, yeah.
aware of those things like being like a potential risk assessment
Mm-hmm.
again, then
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you might want to get your hands on that, to be preventive about it. But if you're not
Exactly.
self-aware and if you're not investing the time on creating that kind of culture that is self-aware of their own areas of improvement,
Yes.
then you might repeat the same mistake and not learn the lesson, the first, the second, the third, the fifth complaint.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's now makes more sense. The maturity that you're talking about is when you get feedback, not to ignore it, maybe to implement
Yep.
something. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. That makes
hmm
sense. That makes sense. Yeah, and what else?
I would say we cannot, like, that's not an exercise that we can do daily, maybe, but
Mhm.
I would like add that we can aspire as an industry to be more informed.
Yeah. I think that's
Yes.
that's the like you said aspiration. I was thinking more about like a mission, right? Like a
Mm,
long-term mission. And because we can only start with the culture of the people who are around us, and we can only influence each other, but that's going to take already some time. And then thinking about like global industries, global food, because I'm thinking of global language. I'm thinking of global prejudice and more of like us like social justice. I know that food safety and people getting sick and dying is not the same, but there are definitely parallels. Like this is important, like people who have prejudice and bias and they're not getting jobs just because their vowels are a little bit different or people don't even know why, but they just sound different, so then they're considered less than and things like that. And both of these things, I think, if we think further afield, you're talking about like global industries, and I'm talking about like prejudice and bias. Like have far-reaching consequences, and it starts really locally. I guess we could say.
yes. Yes. It's like
Absolutely.
seeing it globally, the credibility part or the credibility aspect. Okay, awesome. It's also like not only for the brand, right? It's also for the
Yes.
team. It's also for the ownership of your work. Like,
Hmm.
what kind of credibility would you like to have or to present yourself with,
Yeah. What do you want to
right?
be known for? Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which, if you have something else, please add it. But I was thinking credibility. right? Like what you're known for, that is essentially branding. Like let's be honest, these days, right? You're known for what you've done in the past. And so if you start having certain habits, then that's what you're known for. And like I don't want to mention names, but you mentioned certain brands to me and you're like, "Oh yeah, these guys are good. These guys are clean." I can tell you when I go to the supermarket, I'm just like scanning for some of those things and I'm looking for the things that I already know. So, another thing that I wanted to add to that was we kind of touched on the idea of like almost standards, right? And saying like rules, are they implicit, are they explicit? And for example, in my group, when there is somebody new too, or even when somebody's not new, but literally every time somebody is jumping in what we call the hot seat, we say, "Hey, what are you working on today? Like, what do you want us to focus on?" And in their kind of area in the platform, they have a place where they can write what it is they're working on. They know, oh, these THs, man, they're so difficult in English, or I want to work on connected speech or rhythm or something like that. So they actually have like a checklist, right? And we've all come together to be like, okay, these are the important things we all notice about how you speak, that you know what, if you want to be treated more equally, this is something that you could work on, right? Just as yourself, right? Because we can't change the world. So my point is, I wanted to talk a little bit about checklists because I imagine if we go back to those 5 pillars in terms of training, you probably want some kind of list, right? Some kind of checklist. So is that something that you would normally do with a team of people? Like that's what you would create, no?
Yeah, 100%. It will be a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. And I
checklist
think
is
there's
my actual middle name.
your first name we know now is Laura.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
we have Laura
Checklist.
Checklist Edith. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Okay. Perfect, right? Because that makes sense in terms of training. But didn't you also say that there's two drivers kind of, right? That go with
Yes.
this.
And I think using the word checklist for that comparison,
Hmm.
it's interesting because I think checklist as papers, let's say, as something, actually I have some here. I can show you.
Okay. Just because
Speaking
that's
of,
your middle
I'm
name.
just gonna like, yeah, I'm just gonna hide the name of the company, obviously, but like here it is.
Perfect.
This is the paper that connects in the organizational chart the bottom to the
Hmm.
top. Because sometimes information comes from the top to the bottom. Well,
Hmm.
this should like have a diagnosis, I'm gonna say, of how
Hmm.
well things are being performed or done on site. If you
So
had
we sure.
everything on check, right? Like if
Right.
you had everyone wash their hands before going in, if
Right.
they prepared the chlorine to the right concentration or the right
Hmm.
amount, did they actually make sure that the entire place was clean? Sometimes in that organizational chart, we're not going to have all the positions being there in front of everyone, making sure that that line is working correctly. Am I correct? So this is what those papers or what those documents work for or do.
Yeah. Oh, and can I
Yeah.
say something about
So
that too?
yes,
Because
yes,
often we think, oh, more paperwork, oh, more, oh, lists, oh, checklists, right? We find that that's more work, right? And we think like, oh, I'm going to just take the shortcut, right? But often people don't realize that when you cut corners, it costs you more time, it costs you more money, it costs you more whatever in the end. And really kind of like the long way around is the shortest way.
and I'm gonna say it is like the comparison and also the duality. Yeah,
Hmm.
the duality of what a strong system or a strong culture needs, which is the
Ha.
credibility
Uh-huh.
and the inclusivity that the environment brings. So that's like the two part that we were
Exactly.
like touching on just a second ago.
Uh-huh. Yes, yes. The
Because
credibility is like when we say credibility, credit meaning these things are what's another word for that?
assurance,
Yes, assurances. That's good. Quality assurance, right? Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yes,
Yeah. And when we think about those things, for example, I'm gonna bring it back to language, is like if you take a vowel that's difficult in Spanish, like ah as in cat, right? Ah. I have a checklist in my mind. Okay, my tongue has to be forward. Check. My jaw has to be more open. Ah, check, right? I have 3 things. I'm thinking about my lips, my jaw, and my tongue. We can even make checklists for accent, for pronunciation. And you think like, oh my God, I've got to think about all these things at first, but then you're going to get automaticity, right?
Mhm.
And so having that is then something I don't have to think about this anymore. It's perfect and it's
Brings the
easy.
assurance
Exactly. And the
that comes
credibility
with
is
the
where I was.
credibility.
Yeah, I'm trying to come back to that, to credibility, right? Exactly. Like we have a system. This is professional, right? And it's the same thing. It comes back to that pride, that empowerment is we might think it's a silly little checklist. Who wants to do that, right? Who has time for that? Let's just get to work. But no, like because taking the time to make it, to do it, right? It ingrains something. It makes something click inside of our neurons, right? And so that's what I wanted to, yeah, talk about for credibility. And the other one was inclusivity. And I think most people, when they think inclusivity, they think like, oh, are we talking gender? Are we talking race? Like, what are we talking about here? So tell me what you mean when you say inclusivity.
I think actually companies are very famous for bring that definition of inclusivity within their companies or within their workforce, and I think that's important, and I think that's something that everyone wants to feel represented in a way in companies. So that's the
Hmm.
inclusivity that it's outside. But as a duality or comparison that comes with credibility, like the credibility that comes within the teamwork, the inclusive aspect is, in my opinion and in my experience, being inclusive with some mistakes sometimes and actually getting that feedback, because that
Hmm.
then makes an environment that it's open for errors and it's a safe space, because we are allowing space for error but also space, a lot of space for compliance
And growth, I think
and
too.
growth.
And that,
Yes, yes,
yeah, yeah.
that's
And
the
I
growth
think
that
that,
we need.
yeah,
Yes.
totally. Because I think what, like, so we're talking inclusivity inside the group and also
That
widening.
permeates.
Yes, the larger culture, right? Like we said, the vision, the things we're trying to change kind of in a larger scale, right? Because I'm going back to like my experience in school and learning languages, and it was very much like wrong, wrong, and you're like, I don't want to be wrong. And then it makes it more difficult to change that culture. In my case, I'm thinking of the culture of learning languages. And in your case, you want to change the wider culture of just making things safer, and making that the norm and literally changing norms, as we go. And it might start with like us, what I think is a silly little checklist, right? But that's how it starts, right? Is to kind of like
It
draw a
begins with
line.
us. It
Uh-huh.
begins with us.
Exactly. And maybe even modeling, as well, too. So like super, super interesting. I know you go on site and you go to these farms, and I'm sure that like there's so many interesting things. I remember we were talking about, I think, your latest newsletter. And I was reading it and I'm like, this is so well written. And I really enjoy good writing because you started out talking about like NASA and all these other things. I'm like, how is this about food safety? And it was such an interesting read. So maybe you can tell people where to find more about you and how you talk about these things, because it was the perfect conversation to mix these two very different things together. And I think people would, if they're enjoying this episode, they're gonna really enjoy learning about these things from you. And they might know some people who work in food or work in production or work in transportation, like you say, and they could pass that on to them. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about where to find you.
Well, first of all, thank you again so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I think speaking of different realms, but also as if it's only one realm, makes it realer. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's a
Hmm.
real word or not, but it makes it more
Absolutely.
real, at least for me. So again, thank you for having me, and I hope you can follow me on my Substack. I began this little, well, not little, it's gonna be big, but right now has some information about culture specifically. I hope you can go and read that about HACCP. So it's everything, speaking of systems and human judgment. So if you're interested in that, which I'm assuming you are, please worry about the food that you eat. Please worry about the food safety of the world around us. And you can find me on my Substack. My name in Substack is Miss Miselio. So go and find me there. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we're going to have that in the description. We're going to have it in the show notes, all those kinds of things. So, and I think maybe like me, you didn't know you were interested in this, or you didn't know it could be interesting. Interested, interesting. But you're the perfect person, I think, to learn about these things from because you write so well about them and it makes it so real, like you said, and it touches on it in a way that makes me say, like, oh, yes, this is all of our problem because we all need to kind of push back, a
It's for
little bit.
us as
Uh-huh.
consumers.
Exactly, exactly. And like this is important. This is really important. So thank you
Yes.
so much, Edith, for coming today.
Thank you.
And I think we could probably even find some more interesting kind of how should we say?
Yes, actually, I have one last phrase that I want to close on this
Oh,
end.
please. What are we gonna close with
Uh,
today? Tell me what we're gonna say.
I'm gonna say that today reminded me that food safety systems, which is what I do for a living, only
Mhm.
works when knowledge can move freely in the room. And this has been
Exactly.
this perfect safe space for that. So thank you very much again.
Exactly, exactly. That's I think where it starts with food safety and feeling safe and just knowing that like being vulnerable can lead to really good outcomes too, right? So yes,
Yes.
absolutely. It's these things that people would not think are related, but they really, really are in this way. So thank you so much for coming again. And I'm sure we can find other things to talk about on another episode because Spanish, English, right? All the things. We've got all kinds of things to talk about. So we'll say goodbye to everybody today, knowing that we'll probably do another episode soon, right?
I'm down. Thank you very
So
much and bye
thanks, guys.
bye.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
listening.
everyone.
And thanks for sticking around to the end, everybody. If you do, you know that I like to share a little story about what's going on with me in life lately. And I forgot to mention this during the show, but I actually used to work at a grocery store. And yeah, if you know me, it's one of my many, many jobs that I've had in the past. Anyways, I used to work at a store called Trader Joe's. And every night we had to go through the produce and check all the best buy dates and take everything off the shelf that wasn't good anymore. And now that I think about it, it's probably what made my experience at Costco so frustrating the other day, because I've been on the other side of it. I mean, if a customer had told me that they found bad food, or if I had told a manager, well, actually, there we called them like captains and mates because there was this ship theme going on. Anyways, they would totally thank us for catching a mistake before it became a problem, which I guess really sums up exactly the kind of culture that we want to cultivate. So listen, if you have a specific topic about accents and pronunciation that you'd like to hear, or even if you think something might be related, let me know and I'll try to make it a reality. And I'll see you in the next episode.